Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming on this beautiful night. My name is Gabriel Brodbar. I'm the Executive Director of the NYU Reynolds program in social entrepreneurship. NYU Reynolds program has two goals. First is to scour the globe, find great change-making talent, help them transform themselves into social entrepreneurial game changers. And the second is to build the professional infrastructure that's needed for these ideas to really take root and flourish. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to the 10th anniversary of our Social Entrepreneurship in the 21st Century Speaker Series. Tonight's event, of course, is entitled Economically Sustainable and Socially Impactful, Building a Business that Thrives in Both Worlds. We are so happy to be welcoming Daniel Lubetzky, founder and CEO of Kind Bar, back to the Reynolds stage. He was last a guest with us in 2013, and to welcome for the first time Ann VANDERMEY, who's going to be leading our discussion and is with Forbes magazine. I also want to say a huge thank you to Cavendish Global for co-sponsoring tonight's event. Cavendish Global is a truly extraordinary peer-to-peer network of families that are focused on investing for catalytic impact, engaging in pioneering grant-making, and sustainable philanthropy. So welcome to all our friends from Cavendish. We're really thrilled that NYU Reynolds was recently named a partner with Cavendish, and we're very excited about beginning to work with them on social entrepreneurship and impact investing. NYU Reynolds views social entrepreneurship as a pretty broad landscape. It must encompass for-profit, not-for-profit, and hybrid approaches to social change. And one of the many reasons I'm so excited about tonight's conversation is that Daniel provides such a powerful example of the critical leadership role business can and must play in building a sustainable future. Kind is what a for-profit looks like when its commitment to behaving in a socially responsible way is legitimately baked in to the DNA of the company. This is not Volkswagen duping us into believing their cars are good for the environment or some greenwashing campaign. Kind's value and commitment cut across every aspect of the company's operation and culture. They shape how they source supplies, how their employees are treated, how product is packaged and distributed, and how they engage philanthropically. One of the things that I think is so interesting here is that the positive impact Kind is having is not only about what the company does, but also in how they do it. Yes, the product is good in and of itself in terms of health and well-being, and it's fantastically delicious, as I'm sure you'll all agree, right? These products are not landmines or cigarettes. They're good products. But what makes Kind, I think, so remarkable is the purpose and the transparency and the integrity that Daniel brings to a product-focused, for-profit endeavor. This is what distinguishes them as truly a not only for-profit operation, and that's a term that he was smart enough to trademark. So every time you say that, you have to give him $1. This not only for-profit philosophy, and it's at the end of the day, and I think we'll see today, it's really a practice. It's such an important part of solving this larger puzzle of how we change the world. I know this is going to be a fascinating and very honest conversation. We'll have about 35 minutes or so for the discussion, and then 35 minutes to include all of you in the conversation. I want to say a very quick welcome to the 15 MBA students that are joining us here in New York from the Wits Business School in South Africa. And I also want to say a huge welcome to the many schools, Kind University ambassadors, and folks that are joining us via our live simulcast all over the world. We'd love to have you participate in the conversation as well, so please tweet your questions using NYU SOCENT or at NYU Reynolds. And with that in mind, please join me in warmly welcoming Daniel Lubetzky and Ann VANDERMEY.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I'm so excited to be here today, not just because Daniel is an incredibly successful social entrepreneur, but also because I am a kind bar addict, as I know are many of you. But before we get to kind, Daniel, can you talk a little bit about how you got started? Your book opens with this very harrowing scene where you're in a tiny New York apartment, business is not going well, and you're literally surrounded by boxes of unsold cosmetic product.
By the way, guys, there's some seats up front here if you guys want to come. And before I answer your question, I want to welcome also the Cavendish group. I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed. I thought I was going to arrive and meet this 80-year-old British gentleman bringing me offer me tea. But it's like this cool New Yorker and global entrepreneur. So, okay, fine. But and did you say heroin like I was with a heroine? Or you mean harrowing, like incredibly difficult circumstances? I don't know about so the harrowing circumstances were the beginning of my postgraduate school journey. I mean, I was doing business since I was a kid, but my first business after I went to college and law school was a company called Peaceworks. And the concept to the college students that are here is, I conceived the concept right in college, was using business as a force for bringing neighbors together, trying to use the force of commerce to help human beings discover each other's humanity as they trade with one another, to shatter cultural stereotypes, as they cement relationships, create vested interest in them wanting to maintain those relationships, and then creating stability for the region. So that was the concept that I wrote about. And then the story that you're asking me to start with is, when I decided to start Peaceworks, I was trying to test this concept. And before I went into the food space, I met a group of Israeli Jews and Israeli Bedouins and Jordanian Bedouins also, that were making Dead Sea minerals and Dead Sea mud soaps and Dead Sea skincare treatment creams and aromatherapy oils and all these mud soaps and minerals. And I decided to test this by ordering 500 of different types of aromatherapy oils, 500 soaps, 500 mud masks, and so on. And the first thing that happened is that they arrived, so they rang the doorbell and I said, just, yeah, please bring them up. And the guy from downstairs said, sir, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Please come downstairs. And I walked downstairs, and it was a 20-foot truck, because I had misunderstood. I didn't know what I was doing, and that's the first example of what I didn't know. I ordered 500 of each times 7. I figured it'll fit in this corner of my studio apartment. It added up because it was very bulky. So I didn't know what to do. I recruited the poor guy to help me bring it up on the passenger elevator, and then I started filling the stuff up. I had a studio that was probably from where the lectern is to here, so I had to fill up when I slept in my Fulton apartment, in my Fulton. Up behind there was a wall of boxes, around there was a wall of boxes, and there was a labyrinth. If I needed to go to the bathroom or to get a bowl of cereal, to walk through the labyrinth to try to do it. It was a very tough decision. When do I want to get some cereal? Because it was going to be a 20-minute commitment to go across. I expended more calories going to get there and going through the obstacle course. But the good news is that Mother's Day was coming, and the whole concept was I was going to sell these in gift baskets. And which son would not want their mother to have beautiful, clean skin made through the cooperation of Arabs and Israelis? I mean, I was like, this is going to be, my biggest worry was that I was not going to be able to fulfill the orders quickly enough. And I put in some little ads in neighborhood newspapers, and all of the ads were pretty much just text. There was no pictures or images. It was just talking about the theory of economic cooperation. And just because I had to, at the very bottom, in a tiny footnote, font size 6 or something, it explained what the products were. But then again, who doesn't want to give their mother the gift of cooperation in the Middle East? So I was waiting by the phone very excitedly, and Mother's Day came and Mother's Day went, and I got a total of 3 phone calls. And those 3 phone calls were, one was an AT&T operator offering me an 800 number The second one was an accountant. Had she known there was nothing to account for, she would not try to offer her services. And the third one, I thought was a consumer, but it was the only person curious enough to know what I was doing was another guy that was selling also Dead Sea cosmetics. So I was completely paralyzed. And right now it's so fun to tell this story, but when that happened, I was absolutely depressed because I had $10,000 in savings from my law school jobs that I had plowed into buying this inventory, and I could not move that stuff. And it was both literally and figuratively suffocating me because I would sleep with these aromatherapy oils. Maybe that's where my new ideas for other ventures came out, because I was like this. People thought I was running a spa from the, when they would came into the 8th floor. I had no dating life. Nobody wanted to say, who's this weirdo? And was that what you wanted me to start with?
Yes. So you dug yourself out eventually. Was there a point when you
I
started
still
feeling...
have some of those Dead Sea creams. Let me give you... No, just...
Was there a point when you started feeling like Kind had hit it big? Was there a specific moment when it finally felt okay and less scary to have walked away from a secure and well-paying job as a Stanford-trained lawyer?
So up until... The interesting thing is that when I look back, I can't believe that I didn't give up along the way earlier, because especially the first 10 years before the Kind brand was launched, and the first year when the Kind brand was launched, it was like on the thinnest, I don't know how to say, thread. Like our survival was really, really not determined. Every breath mattered. And I could sometimes not, I had a $24,000 salary for 10 years, and sometimes I could not pay myself that salary. And I used to hang out sometimes when I was doing sales, and I would go store by store, which I can tell you about. But when here at NYU, they had great places to get a gigantic falafel, which I would just eat that whole thing, refill it with all the salads, because that would be my meal for the entire day. And those 10 or 11 years were harrowing. You could describe them as such when you look back. But when I was living it, it didn't faze me. I mean, sometimes I had many moments where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should go back to join my other friends that took jobs at a law firm. But for the most part, I just kept going. And part of what kept me going was that I really cared about what we're trying to create, to get people to work together, Arabs and Israelis. And that was a much bigger challenge than the challenges that I was facing. Part of what kept me going, I think, is just my personality, that I just like challenges and I don't give up. And part of it, I think, was that I just didn't know better, that I just didn't realize that it didn't always need to be this hard. And when we launched Kind, one of the fascinating things to me, which I was sharing with somebody earlier today, that I reflect on a lot, and I talk about it in the book, The Kind Thing, I almost didn't start Kind, because after 10 years of an exhausting journey with just hand-to-mouth and bear survival, we almost gave up and closed, because immediately prior to Kind, we had launched another brand and put all of our resources in it, and then the manufacturer changed the formula and added artificial ingredients, and so we needed to advise. We sold that product only into natural stores. We were importing that product from Australia, and they didn't care about it being natural, but we cared, and when they changed the formula and added sorbitol and sulfur dioxide, and we had to advise the trade, our orders dried up. They couldn't, the natural trade, the Whole Foods of the world couldn't order our product anymore. And I remember having a conversation with Rami Leshem. By the way, one of the coolest things about today is that I got an email earlier today from Becky Inges. Becky, are you here? I thought I was going to embarrass you. You have to stand up. So Becky actually now works at NYU, and 18 years ago she was an intern at Peaceworks, and I haven't talked with her in 18 years, so this is a very special reunion. But in life, all of us meet people and we touch their lives and they touch our lives, and then we move on. And they help you become who you are, but a lot of times you don't maintain contact with everybody, with other fellow students that you guys will lose contact with, or friends, and it's really, really awesome being able to reconnect with people that after 18 years actually helped you get to where you are. And it's very humbling when kind pivoted to a significant success, to remember that there were so many people that helped me survive along the way in the business. And you asked about when I knew that I didn't need to worry. It was probably after, I mean, again, I didn't think about it that way, but if I had to right now look back, it was probably year 2 or 3. But I am constantly in a survival mode. I'm constantly worrying. For the last 22 years, doesn't go a day that I don't think about the business and worry. It's just part of what drives me. And I'm very excited. I'm very humbled by our growth and by the amazing team that we've been able to form. We now have 600 team members in the company, and we've sold over 1 billion bars. And yet, I still, perhaps because I was marked by those 10 or 11 years of bear survival, perhaps because of my childhood and learning about what my father went through, who was a Holocaust survivor, and I'm always on survival mode in terms of always being very self-aware of not taking anything for granted.
Speaking of your father, those were some of the most striking passages for me in your book when you talk about how his life kind of shaped your mission. Can you talk a little bit about, what influence he had on you?
Yeah, so my mom and dad were, and my mom still is, my dad passed away, but they were always the kindest people wherever you went. They always were the guys that when you were in the movie theater, they were like offering you popcorn, even if you didn't know them and they were total strangers. They were just saying hi to everybody and always being very friendly. And my dad, what was fascinating about his ability to always be the kindest person was that he went through one of the darkest periods in the history of humanity. He was in the Dachau concentration camp, and he was 9 years old when the war started, and 15 and a half when he was rescued by liberated by American soldiers. And what was remarkable about him is that he made sure to talk to me from an early age about the stuff that he went through and about the challenges that he had, about how horrible it was, and he really wanted me to never forget. But he also made sure to remind me about how the reason he survived is because of the kindness of others. And I share in the book a few stories, but there were so many, but it includes the story of this German soldier that when people were not watching, threw a potato at my dad's feet. And my dad always felt that that potato, not only the nourishment of those calories helped him survive, but just the recognition that that German soldier had looked into his eyes and seen a little remnant of humanity and had seen it into him to take the risk, because he could have been severely punished for giving food to the prisoners. And there are many other stories of how if it wasn't because of the kindness of other people, my father would have not made it. So my dad actually passed away the year that I founded Kind, or that I conceived Kind. And looking back, it became very clear to me that the whole essence of the company was imbued by his example and who he was.
When you talk about social mission at Kind, how much do you think that mission informs its business success and drives its success in the marketplace?
0.
Wow.
No, the business success is informed, and I learned the hard way, because at Peaceworks I told you I was. It doesn't mean that there's not enormous value to the social mission, but why are we financially successful as a business? Is because we have the most delicious product with nutritionally rich ingredients that you can see and pronounce, and it fits people's needs to do the kind thing for their body and for their taste buds. That is, and when we look at surveys and we ask people, the reason they buy our product, 95% is body, 95% is taste buds, and you can have multiple answers. There's like 30 questions we ask. Social mission only registers among 30% and towards the very, very back. It doesn't mean that they don't love that we're socially responsible, but the reason why they pick up that bar and buy it is because it fits their nutritional and taste needs. And the insight that I had about it came from Peaceworks, because when I was putting those ads only talking about the social concept, people always like, when I couldn't sell those Dead Sea minerals, I then went into the street fairs of New York and I like started trying to sell them one by one. And when I would talk about the social mission and about how we were bringing people together, a lot of people would walk by our booth and say, "Oh, that's so nice, so nice." And then they would walk up on to eat the empanada or the, you know. But when I started talking about the features of the product, oh, this hand treatment cream with avocado oil, it has a special vitamin E, then I had a couple of sales, not that many, but at least a couple. But I really did learn that it is my perspective that I never want a social mission to be a crutch in a business. And there was a very interesting conversation that you guys were having at the earlier meeting, and I think there's enormous benefits to have a social mission. I can talk about them, but if you're relying on your social mission to sell your product, you may very well get in trouble. You should never do the right thing for the sake of selling more product. You should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And when people buy a product, they buy it because of the product. And so that doesn't mean that there's not enormous value to having a social mission, but I think when I've seen a lot of the data and studies that were put out by the Cone Communications out of Boston, which is a firm that cares a lot about social responsibility, and personally, that data does not conform with my personal experience. I do think that a lot of us increasingly are socially responsible. And I do think that the future of humanity will rest on more businesses being socially responsible. And I do think that we're going to demand companies being socially responsible. And I can talk about the many benefits of social responsibility, but fundamentally when you're selling a consumer product good, you should never let the social mission be the crutch. You should always make sure that you have the highest quality, the best value proposition. Whatever is your value proposition, it should stand on its own. And the social mission should be an additional reason to believe. It should not be what drives the sale.
So if it doesn't help the bottom line, is there a way to get more companies to do it?
I mean, it helps the bottom line, but it's not why people buy the product. But it helps the bottom line in thousands of other ways. First of all, I talked about how when I was having the biggest challenges, I never gave up. Like when you have a purpose that's authentic and you really believe in what you're doing and you care about it deeply, you will give it more than when it's just a business. You will work for it harder. When you have a team that believes in what you're trying to do and they have a higher purpose and something that you're trying to inspire people to. So our mission is to do the kind thing for your body, for your taste buds, and for your world. So for your taste buds is delicious product, never sacrificing taste for health. For your body is all the products have to be nutritionally rich. The first ingredient in all of our products is a nutritionally rich ingredient. Sugar should never be our number one ingredient. It should be a very small amount just to make the product have the right profile, but always you should lead with products that are nutritionally rich. And then, and we purposely said do the kind thing for your body and for your taste buds first, because that's the product proposition, and because, like Gabe said, we are a business. We're what we call a not only for-profit business, but we're a business, and we want to run it that way. And then do the kind thing for your world, which there is a social mission in also making products that are healthful and that are responsible to your body, that where you can live kind by eating those products. But then we also have a exclusively social mission of doing the kind thing for others, for trying to make this a kinder world. And I can, if you want, talk a little bit about how that works. But to answer your question, that gives me enormous energy. That's what motivates me the most. It's not whether we're going to sell another $100 million or another $10 million. It's about how can we reinvent the world and reinvent the way people see businesses. That inspires our team to work that extra mile. That does create more loyalty. Once you have a product that people love and they think that it is the highest quality, then on top of it, for them to know that you're trying to do something positive for society, it should inspire loyalty, it should inspire interest, it should inspire partnerships, it should enable you to do other fun things. And I can go on. There's a lot of benefits, but the benefits are, the most important benefit is that you're doing something good, that you're doing something good that you care about.
Can you describe a little bit the "and" philosophy? And do you see any limitations to that? Like, If a company is a chemical manufacturer and it pollutes the environment, can it also be good as well?
So, so the AND philosophy is, we have 10 tenets at Kind, and in the book we describe what are those 10 tenets. And the AND philosophy is the one that informs all of the others. It's the central tenet of how we do things. And it's about thinking creatively, about questioning false compromises, about when somebody says you have to do this or that, questioning the underlying assumptions that are making you think that you have to make choices. And sometimes those choices are false. Not always. There are times when you have to make choices. And yes, there are limits to the AND philosophy because there are things where you need to choose this path or that path. But sometimes in modern society and in the way our brains work, we're conditioned to be very expedient with our decisions. And so there may be something that in the short term may be more expedient, and maybe you can only accomplish A or B in the short term, and it might be easier to get there. But if you work hard enough and challenge yourself and are able to find a way to achieve two goals that are seemingly at tension, that's when you achieve enormous value. When you create interdisciplinary businesses or biotech, biotechnology or biochemistry, or all of those disciplines where you're creating enormous value, very often it's because you're taking seemingly incompatible things and matching them together and then coming up with beautiful stuff. It's about questioning, does the product have to be tasty or healthy? Well, no. Why can't it be both tasty and healthy? Does the product have to be either convenient to carry or wholesome? Does it have to be a Twinkie or a perishable item? Well, no, there's a way to be able to do something that's both wholesome and convenient, tasty and healthy. Does a company have to be socially impactful or economically sustainable? Well, there's a way that they can work in tandem and they can reinforce one another. So the theory of AND, the AND philosophy is about isolating the assumptions that underlie your premise and saying, wow, does this hold true? And if you're able to challenge that assumption, which sometimes you are, then you can create a lot of value either in society or in your life or in your personal life or in business or in other stuff.
So it's kind of worth asking the question, can it be and instead of or?
Yeah, but one of my team members, Jacques Antebi, we just had our national company meeting and he put in a slide and said, okay, guys, we know that Daniel always talks about and, I'm going to talk about or, okay? Because we need to make choices here. And he's right. He's totally right. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they said, what is your biggest weakness or the thing that you recognize that is most dangerous about you for your business? And it's that same thing. It's that creativity. Because if you just, that creativity can create so much positive stuff, but if you don't control it and modulate and channel it, you can drive people nuts, like in my team. And if you have too many ideas and then you want to do everything, it can then paralyze the organization and make you lose focus. So it's very, very important to also make choices. It doesn't mean that you can challenge all assumptions. It doesn't mean that you can do everything. You have to make choices. And it's not about dreamily thinking that you don't have to have personal responsibility because you can do anything you want. And it's not about thinking you don't need to be disciplined. It's just about working harder, actually, and takes more work. It's not a path of least resistance. And is about, all right, the way it's been done for a long time is this simpler way. Can I invest more upfront, but then have a longer pay in the long term because I was able to challenge that? And to the question about whether a chemical pollutant can do something socially responsible, I mean, I actually think that a lot of businesses that are large get attacked unfairly when they're, providing jobs and providing what consumers want. So I don't want to sound like the small guys are always the right ones. There's a lot of small guys that are also not following the best ethics. So I don't know what that chemical company is providing. If they're helping us have light and that's the only way to have light, maybe it's very easy to just say, oh, they're the monster. I don't know that they're the monster. But I will say what I resent is when a company uses the concept of corporate social responsibility as a Band-Aid to make it sound like they're doing something when they're not really making an effort to address the fundamental aspect of the business. Like if a company is producing products that are not good for you, but then they make a donation to the Diabetes Association, it's a little bit harmful to them too. It's not just harmful to us as a society. It's harmful to us because then that's why we all become so cynical, and it's harmful to them because consumers are very sophisticated and they're able to discern when companies are not being honest.
So on a related note, capitalism itself has kind of gotten a bad rap lately. From Bernie Sanders to the Pope, you have a lot of people criticizing the system. What do you think of arguments that we need to reform it, or that it's not possible that it can be a force for the greater good?
Since we're with the Cavendish group, I'm going to paraphrase Winston Churchill, and something along the lines of, capitalism is the worst of all systems except for all others. I mean, there's a lot of problems with capitalism.
Along with democracy.
Right. So I think capitalism is beautiful. I'm fascinated by capitalism. I think the way it organizes in such an efficient way value, the way it makes things competitive, like the way it drives prices down to a minimum. And I studied economics when I was in college. I think capitalism is a great system. The problem is when people forget that we are human beings and that we have something of responsibility beyond making money. The problem is us in our culture, in our society, where we forget that capitalism is there to just be a way to channel market forces. But there is no reason why capitalism has to be the dirty capitalism of what was that guy that had the Bernie Madoff? You got me confused with Bernie Sanders. Between Bernie Sanders and Larry David, no, there's no reason why capitalism has to be soulless, or why you need to. There's a way that you can execute capitalism with a lot of elegance, and there's a way that you can execute capitalism without heart or soul. And it's upon all of us in this room and in society to demand from ourselves, from our employers, from the companies that we work with, that they have a greater sense of our responsibility to society. The challenges that we're going to face as society, that we're facing already, and some of them we don't want to acknowledge, but when we were at our company meeting, one of my team members said, what keeps you up at night? And I said, I'm a worry bug, so let me elaborate. But I'm mostly a worry bug about things that have nothing to do with our business. I'm more worried about my children's future. I mean, the problems with climate change, the problems with the drought in California, the problems with water scarcity and resource scarcity, 1 or 2 billion people elevating the standard of living, demanding more resources from our planet, while we're having these problems with climate change. If the climate changes in the area where most of the agriculture is taking place in California or in New Jersey, and degrees change and water changes and it moves up, by a few degrees, the dislocation that is going to cause. I mean, 85% of the world's almonds today come from California. We source over 1% of the world's almonds. And it's terrifying to think that right now, a lot of those trees are dying because of desalinization. And there's just so many challenges, and not to mention nuclear proliferation and xenophobia and what's happening in the Middle East with so much extremism, so much hatred. And unless we, recognize our shared humanity, which is a lot of what the KIND movement is about helping us get comfortable, moving outside our zone of comfort to be kind to strangers, unless we find ways for the private sector to play a role in solving these ills, it's going to be much, much harder. In today's day and age, the most prevalent influence in our lives is business. Back in, in the 15th century, in the medieval Europe, it was the church that was the organizing principle. And then in the 16th, 17th century, the nation state rose, and that was the most powerful entity. But starting with the 18th and 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, and today with the advent of technology and with the privatization of life, market forces and the private sector permeate our lives in such enormous ways, as well as philanthropy and private philanthropy. Unless we're able to ride the market forces, the cool thing about business is that it provides a path for sustainability and scalability. And I agree that not all ills in society can be addressed through business. There are things, I also run a foundation, there are things that it's very hard to have a model for everything being done through business. But to the extent that business can help tackle some of these issues, it's beautiful because it's scalable, it's sustainable, and if you're able to create a model where you are advancing both the social and the business objectives, then it's so much more energizing. And that's what we're in the process of trying to discover. How far can we go? That's what excites me. That's why I haven't just sold the company or gone public, because I'm trying to, with my team, figure out whether we can really help redefine how people see businesses and be a positive force. And we're just at the beginning of that journey.
I hope you get there.
Me too.
Yeah. So one more question before we go to audience questions. What advice do you have for people who want to make a social impact but also not go hungry doing it?
At NYU, near here, there's this falafel place. And there was also this place that it was all you could eat, and for like $7.50, I would fill up this gigantic plate, and then I would have my lunch, breakfast, dinner, and the following thing for that thing. So I can give you tips on that too. For someone that wants to change the world, but not, but get there.
Still make a living, yeah.
I mean, we can speak for hours about that question, but most of the audience, I guess the audience is pretty diverse. There's established business leaders, there's students. What I think is the most important thing that applies to everybody, that I think all of us don't do enough, because we have our cell phones and the email and all these things that are competing for our attention on top of other human beings and our families and our loved ones. We don't have time for ourselves anymore. Like, it used to be the case when I was 18 or 19 years old and I was walking. I remember I used to whistle, and when I was studying in Europe, I would walk for like a couple miles and just let my mind go and think about stuff and think about what I cared about and wonder about life and about, philosophy and all this stuff. And, even up to 10, 15 years ago, that's what our lives were like. Today, when you're in the elevator and you have 30 seconds, we're all looking at our phones. Like, it's fascinating when you look around in the subway or in the elevator or whatever. We don't have a relationship with ourselves. We really don't understand ourselves. How are you going to know that you've lived the life worth living and that you've done what you care about if you don't have enough time with yourself to just ask yourself what's important to me? So what I try to do, and I don't get it right always, but I really, really try, is to just find a time to just have a conversation with myself and to carve out that time where you're not going to be listening to music, when you're not going to be checking your email or your text or your iPhone or your talking on the phone, where you're just going to think, what do I care about? What gives me meaning? Because if you find what it is that you care about the most, if you find that stuff that gives you passion, then you've got it made. If you pursue what you care about, regardless of your level of quote-unquote success that we define artificially as money or financial success or fame or power or whatever, those things are so secondary to living. The journey is what matters, right? It's the journey of pursuing what you care about and giving it your best and giving it your heart. And if you do that, you're also going to probably perform better. You're probably going to be more likely to succeed on a professional basis as well as on a spiritual basis. So I think the most important thing is to make sure that you're on the journey that you really care about and that's important to you. Beyond that, you guys can, if you're interested, I can talk about the phases of entrepreneurship and how I separate a concept or idea, which maybe you wanted me to go less philosophical, more practical. I can do that too.
In terms of practical advice, do you think it's best idea to start your own venture, or can people work from within larger organizations? Is there one kind of ideal way?
There is no perfect answer. It depends on the human being. Again, you need to talk to yourself and make sure that an entrepreneurial venture is not less work. It's not easier. It's much more work. It's more stress. It's also more fulfilling in some ways if it's the right thing for you. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of risk. So I think you need to really understand whether you've got what it takes. And when I'll go ahead and get practical. When starting a venture or when thinking of any idea, I think it's very important to separate 3 phases of entrepreneurship or of creative thinking and execution. The first phase is the creative phase. The second phase is the skeptic phase, and the third phase is the evangelist phase, the execution phase. And it's very important that you keep those separate, because if you don't, you can get into a lot of trouble, as I did many times. The creative phase is when you're trying to reinvent the world or create something new, whether it's a new product or a new venture, or whether it's a project within what you're already doing. And during the creative phase, the most important thing is that you don't be restrained by reality. It really is very important that you be comfortable thinking creatively, thinking with and. In the book, I provide a lot of ideas about how we do that at Kind and how I do it. And it's very, very important that you think outside the box and challenge all conventional wisdom and precisely be comfortable coming up with dumb ideas. If you're not coming up with ideas that seem idiotic, you're not stretching yourself enough, and you're not going to be likely to really invent something new and valuable. So during the first phase, you don't have any constraints. Then when you enter, did you want to ask something, or should I go to
Oh, no, no, but go ahead, please,
You're
actually.
like, yes, yes, I'd like you to be more concise. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. It'll take another 50 minutes and I'll be done with the phase. The second phase is the skeptic phase. And just like in the first phase, you didn't bring any filters or any criteria, you just came up with creative ideas. In the second phase, you have to bring up all the filters. You have to ask whether it's cost effective, whether you've got what it takes, whether your idea is truly creative, what the competition looks like, do you have the financial resources, is the product truly or service truly differentiated, everything. You have to ask everything, and you have to be your own worst critic, and you need to be prepared to ask those tough questions and to walk away if you honestly come up with a conclusion that actually this thing is not going to take off. And that phase is very critical and very difficult for us to be honest with and to invest the time to do it. But it cannot precede or be mixed with the creative phase. You have to separate them. But after the creative phase, you have to be your skeptic. Because if you don't do that and you jump from creative to execution, you might just waste your life doing something really, really insane. And in the book, I share a couple of ideas about stuff that I wanted to do. I wanted to create a Peaceworks cafe where I was going to, for any person that wanted to, they would come and have lunch, and we would pay for their, whatever they paid, they would be paying for their meal and for a homeless meal who would sit down next to them and have lunch with them. And it was a really nice concept because you're feeding the homeless and but you know, execution-wise, it really didn't seem to work. People would, you know, the likelihood that, first of all, homeless people would want to be treated that way, that you're going to be sitting them down and for them to be like entertainment, or the likelihood that you're going to want to be sitting down and having a meal with people that maybe were not in the most sanitary conditions. There were a lot of dumb aspects of execution to a beautiful concept. And that is one of hundreds of ideas that I have that if I had jumped from a creative concept to execution, probably would have not worked. Though I recently learned about a much smarter way to do it, where you pay and they make a donation to feed the homeless, which I think is beautiful. Too bad it didn't occur to me 20 years ago, because it's a really, really nice concept. I hope they take off. And then the third phase is the execution phase. Only if you have gone through the trial by intellectual fire, only if you've really looked yourself in the mirror, say, I've got what it takes, and really, really thought about it hard, and you're determined that this makes sense, then at that point you need to flip a switch in your brain, in your mind, and you say, all right, I'm going to execute. And when you move from skeptic to evangelist, all those doubts that you had, you need to put them aside. You now need to execute. You need to make it happen. And it's very important that you stop asking yourself the question about whether you've got what it takes, about whether this makes sense at that point. Not before, because maybe you don't have it, but also not after, because at that point, when you need to execute, you're going to face enormous challenges. And if you don't have that staying power and that belief in yourself, you might not get there. And as I said, Kind was born in a moment where I almost didn't launch it. I was like this far away of just walking away and closing it. And for me, it's fascinating to think about that. It was a month's difference of survival that suddenly then propelled us and took us off. But it's very important that when you have something that you believe in and you've tested it, that skepticism that you overcame should help also fuel your conviction that you have what it takes, and then just keep going at it, because things will take longer than you imagine always.
I think that's great advice. Okay.
So we'll go ahead and start over here and then take turns at each mic. Thank you so much, first of all, to both of you for such an inspiring presentation. I just wanted to ask about if you'd be willing to share about some of the choices that your company has had to make between the social impact and the business side of it. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share a specific example of that.
I've been asked that question before, and the reason I struggle with answering it, I always really want to be maximally transparent. I don't think that way. I mean, I guess I can go a little bit practical in a second, but the fundamental thing about Kind is that the way we think is we think with and, so we try to fulfill both at once. So I'll give you an example of a couple things we do where I think, I'll give you one example. We have this, has any of you guys ever received the Kind Awesome card? So earlier today I was on a subway. I carry these with me and all my team members carry theirs. And we're about to scale that up to enable all of you guys to be part of this. So very soon I think we're going to make an announcement about that. But if I'm walking on the streets and I see somebody helping somebody carry a baby stroller up or down the subway, or I see somebody that stands up to let another person sit in the subway, or somebody seats their taxi cab to somebody. If I see somebody doing a kind act for them, I approach them and I say, by the way, if they haven't run away and called the police, like, who's this stranger? Then I'm like, no, please, I'm not gonna. The most embarrassing one is when somebody seats their taxi to me and then I'm like, oh, and I start reaching out and they're like, no, I don't want your money. I'm like, no, it's a Kind Awesome card. But you give them the Kind Awesome card, said, that was really kind of you, and in appreciation for your kind act, you go to this website, enter this code, and we send you a couple Kind bars, but more important, we send you another card so that you can then pass it on and celebrate the next person that you notice doing the kind thing to you or to someone else. And the reason why I like this a lot, it took us like 10 years of playing and engineering with kindness, because kindness is the most powerful force in nature. It's one of the only forces that we as nerds call a net happiness aggregator. What do I mean by a net happiness aggregator? When you're kind to somebody else, they feel good about the fact that somebody was kind to them, but you also feel good about yourself. And the more that you go out of your comfort zone, the more that you really, really help a total stranger in a very, very big way, the more that it gives you a warmer heart and makes your day better. So the more that we can be kind to one another, we can just increase happiness. It's a fascinating power. But the reason kindness works is because it's got no ulterior motives, because it's authentic, and you just want to be kind to one another. If you try to be kind for the wrong reasons, or if we try to incentivize people to be kind in the wrong way, it destroys its purity and undermines the power of kindness. So what we wouldn't do is say, hey, be kind towards one another and you'll win a Kind bar. Or, hey, be kind towards one another and you'll win a trip to Disney. I mean, that destroys its purity. What we do is we wait till the kind act has happened for its own reasons, which is just to be kind. Then we just pat the person on the back and we celebrate them and say, that was really nice. And we try to encourage people to be kind towards one another on their own. But what happens is, not only are we finding a small ways to celebrate kindness, we're also finding a way to connect our brand to them at a moment where they deserve to be rewarded with a kind bar. So we really try, when they ask us how much money we give to charity, this year will be a few $1,000,000. But that does not in any way capture how we think about it, because in the way we talk towards one another in our company, we have something called kindos. In the way our team is encouraged to do kind activities for their community, in the way we encourage our community, in the way we speak and do all of that we do to inspire kindness, we don't count that as philanthropy there because it's a marketing part of our brand, but we really are trying sincerely to try to make kindness be more state of mind. So it's very hard for me to think about this or that. And since you're eager for me to answer more questions, I can continue the conversation with you later about small examples of where we are making choices. But the big thing is that we try to transcend the do we do this or do we do that. There are some choices, sometimes about certain sourcing practices or choices that we make, but fundamentally we try to transcend those divides.
So how does one get a Kind Awesome card? Do you have to give your seat to someone on the subway, or is there another way?
I have no idea if my team is going to kill me for saying what I'm about to say, but because we're now in beta, but we haven't launched we haven't rolled it out fully. But if you crash it, you crash it. So hopefully you crash it. You can go to howkindofyou.com, and any of you can go now and recognize somebody that did a kind act. And anytime if you're in the subway or if you're walking by or somebody just does something nice to you, you can go to High Kind of You and celebrate them. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do that through digital cards or through physical cards. And we're going to be, but right now we're beta testing it, and we're going to be announcing it in 10 days. But I kind of shared it with you now, so I hope my team doesn't kill me. And I mean, we do other things since we're just talking about the social mission. We do something. This first program at Kind Awesome is about us just encouraging people to do those small little acts in life and to celebrate those little acts in life and for kindness to be more state of mind. We also try to help those who need it most, like the most susceptible groups, whether it's kids that have been sexually abused or moms that don't have enough money to buy diapers for their kids, or kids that don't have shoes. And the way we select these groups is the community votes for them. And the way the community votes for them is that they pledge to do a small kind act in their honor of a particular cause. So anybody that has a cause they care about, they can load it up on our website. And once a month, the cause that inspired the most kind acts is the one that we support. And that's also something that in a month and a half, we're going to be scaling much more meaningful, but I'm not telling you how. You'll have to join us. Go to kindsnacks.com, get our newsletter, and then in a month and a half, we're going to announce how we're scaling that up also.
Perfect. Good.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the inspiring talk. My name is Karishma Bagani, and I'm a freshman student at NYU currently. I was very interested and I'm thinking about starting up a business, and so I was wondering what advice you'd have for a freshman student, especially in terms of time commitment in the starting phases of a business, and how to strike the balance, a perfect balance between social entrepreneurship and not only for profit.
You ask easy questions. I was going to tell you to focus on your studies, but when I was a student, I was running business on the side. I had like these booths selling watches, and I would go to the president's office in my university and bring this box of gadgets and schmates, like this is this confused Mexican Jew saying schmates. But when I was raised speaking Yiddish at the same time as Spanish. So that's another story. That's another story, like Larry David, Bernie Sanders would say. But I mean, have you ever started a business before or no? And were your parents business people? Well, talk to your parents. Ask them the question. Why are you putting me on the spot? I don't know. It's a very tough question to answer without understanding your circumstances and what opportunities you'd have. I think, I'll speak more generally. When you're a freshman in college, just enjoy what you're doing. Just don't worry so much about the grades. Worry about just learning and about absorbing everything you can and get involved in all the things you can. And if business is something that you're passionate about, maybe join a business club and start learning about how that works. If you have a particular idea for something you want to do, then go ahead and think about. Don't obsess about, I have to start a business or I have to check this thing in the resume. Just enjoy these 4 years to just intellectually engage and grow in all these different things. It's a very special moment for you, and your priority should just be discovering all the possible experiences that you can. And if business is one of them, then go ahead and just get in and start thinking about some of that. You can also read my book. I think it will help. Shameless plug, but I really do think it'll help you. Or go to Gabe's conferences.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alan.
I'm sorry, and read Fortune magazine. Very important.
Exactly.
Will do. My name is Alan. I'm a junior at NYU, and my question is there something that you know now that you wish you had known when you first started your first startup?
No, and I'll tell you why. If I'd known what I know now, most likely I would have been too paralyzed to start Peaceworks or Kind or Mayet or One Voice. All the ventures that I've started, the adults that I consulted with, they're like, you're crazy. You know, you're this. I helped create a movement called One Voice, and they're like, you're a confused Mexican Jew living in New York. You want to get Arabs and Israelis to get together. You're cuckoo. And I went ahead and I created it. And today it's got 750,000 members that, you know, as you can see, they've made peace in the Middle East already. Well, that's not our success yet, but we're not giving up. But no, I'm happy. I have a friend, his name is Rabbi Brian Lurie, and he once told me, Daniel, what I love about you is how naive you are. And I got very upset with him, but I was like, I'm not naive, I'm a pragmatic realist. And I explained how I actually, you know, I'm determined and stuff. But what he meant to say is that the reason why I ventured into these places is because I didn't know what I didn't know. I just did it. And I think it's refreshing in some ways for you to just go for it sometimes. Now, remember, when I said go through the creative phase, then the skeptic phase, do talk to yourself and make sure that, you know, go through the proper research and compare that. You'll spare yourself a lot by doing research and understanding it. But I'm happy that I didn't know all the stuff I know now, because very possibly Peaceworks, Kind, One Voice, Mayet, and a lot of things would have not existed if I hadn't just not known all that I don't know.
Thank you.
I have a question from Taylor at Morgan State, who is watching online. How has the economy affected the growth and stability of Kind?
I mean, we're still, relatively speaking, a very small company, so we're still in a growth phase. So we went through the 2006, 2008 recession and the other smaller recessions, and we just grew through it because we were just starting, you know, our growth superseded those economic trends. I wonder if at some point in the future, once we become an adult, we will start feeling that more. But we're still, right now, we're going from being a baby to being a teenager. We're still a young company, and we're still in a growth mode. And so I don't think the economy has slowed us down yet.
And people are buying health food more and more.
Yeah, there's
Just
a big, there's a lot of things that help us. You know, people, there's some things that are important, like eating healthfully, eating real food. There are things that are important but that are overplayed, but they don't hurt us, like people looking for gluten-free products, which all of us are and have been since the beginning. And there's a lot of both trends for simplicity, authenticity, real food, for people that, you know, are tired of eating stuff that they cannot recognize what they're putting in their bodies, and they recognize that they should put nutrition-rich ingredients in their bodies. So all of that stuff is helping us, and I think those trends are much, much bigger than the slowdown in the economy.
Please.
Hi, my name is Caroline, and I'm very glad that the question about capitalism came up, because it's something that I believe a lot of young people have been scrutinizing lately. It inherently places value on consumption, and as was mentioned, it makes a lot of what success is about your ability to make a living. And for a lot of people, that's the struggle of their life, is their ability to make a living. And so being able to think about being kind to your body is almost like a luxury. And so my question is, how does an entrepreneur, and thinking about who it is that can become an entrepreneur, because it's these thoughts and these space for thinking about solutions to world problems is a luxury in a sense. How do you reconcile that?
It's a very fair question. In the book, I talk about how, with all over my struggles, as I describe as eating my falafel, at the end of the day, my parents were well off. And my dad had come from nothing, with a third-grade education to Mexico. He arrived with nothing. He built himself from nothing. But fortunately for me, he and I was the first person to go in my family to college or graduate school. But fortunately for me, my dad was there. And if I had gotten into true trouble, I knew that I was a phone call away of being able for them to rescue me. And it's a luxury that I had that many people don't have. So I don't think that thinking about saving the world is a luxury that any of us, I don't think that's a luxury, that's an imperative. We all have that responsibility, because otherwise we're all going to be in the same boat. But I recognize the point that you made. Some people are just struggling to make ends meet in their daily lives. And I don't have a response for how, there's small business loans and the small business administration and a lot of programs that helped me and that can help others. But at some point, you're totally right. So for some people, thinking about entrepreneurship and thinking about starting a venture, it's a luxury that they can't pursue, because they're just struggling not just to make ends meet for themselves, but for family members that they're responsible for. And I just acknowledge that it's not everybody has that luxury. So I guess in that sense, you're right. But talking more broadly about the issue that you said about capitalism, this is a very exciting time. When I was a college student, the term social entrepreneur didn't exist. When I started Peaceworks, the term social entrepreneur didn't exist. Gabe teased me about not only for profit. We created the term not only for profit in '93 because we didn't have a language to explain what we were doing. There were people like my mentors, like Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's, who I learned a ton from, was way ahead, and there's many others. The guy from Timberland, and Howard Schultz from Starbucks, and many other people have done great work. If you think about it today, this is potentially the golden age of social entrepreneurship. Potentially, because who knows if we're going to overplay our hand and then not be authentic, and then there's going to be a backlash, or if this is just going to be the beginning and it's going to become something amazing. But we really do have the potential to transform society. And I see, the way young people care today about these issues is so different. When I was a student, Net Impact and these organizations, they didn't exist. Now it has, I think, like 26,000 members or some. It's incredible, the momentum of people that care about social enterprise, like Gabe said, whether it's a business with a social mission or a nonprofit that thinks with creative mechanisms. All these are artificial constructs created by the tax code to some degree. If you really think about it, the B Corps are being created to try to address that, but we're just at the beginning of our journeys. What defines what is a business or what is a philanthropy or a nonprofit? All of these things are going to in some ways meld and stretch. There's going to be a lot of gray zone opportunities. And I'm fortunate that in our company, I'm the majority shareholder, and my team and I have together a super majority shares of the company, so the destiny is in our hands. And it provides us with so many opportunities for us to decide, do we want to create philanthropy? Do we want to do those questions about those compromises? For us, they're not compromises, they're choices that we have the luxury of thinking about. And how I do think for us what's important is we need to make sure that we continue being lean and competitive and building a long-term business. If we just dial it to just care about the today, about helping him heal the world, and we start forgetting about what our consumers look for from us, we might then be beaten in the marketplace, and they might not be around in 2 or 3 years. But as long as we modulate, and this is what's really exciting for us as we're discovering it, as we modulate to continue being the best business which really, because you can't not, if you want to survive and succeed, you need to invest in the business. You need to think of it as a business if you are a business. If you put the social mission first, then you're not going to do any good to anybody, because most likely you're not going to survive. And then you have to modulate to make sure that you're addressing your consumers' needs and that you're providing them the products and services they want. But if you're doing that, and on top of that, challenging conventional wisdom about how far a business can go, we have a lot of exciting things that we're going to be announcing in the coming month and in the coming year. And even the stuff that we have planned for 2015 and 2016 is just the beginning of how far you can go in redefining. For us, we love that there's a lot of people that love our products and that love our brand, but what we want to be is transcend that and become a movement and become a state of mind where people think they associate us in their hearts with becoming better human beings and with all of us being part of a movement to inspire kindness. That is an awesome vision that we're just at the ground level of being able to start creating. But that's what excites us, and that's what turns us on.
Very unfortunately, I think we are out of time. But everybody who didn't get a chance to ask a question, Daniel will be available and signing books in the back, so stick around. And thank you very much to Reynolds, and thank you to
guys.
Cavendish.
Thanks for being here.
And thank you so much to Daniel.